Right, gentlemen, today we are starting with the unit 4 of this training, Project Risk Management. And today we are going to talk about the principles and concepts. Still, we are going slow. We are just exploring the peripheries of risk management. And although the concepts which we will be discussing here and which we have discussed so far, they are very instrumental in future when we will be going in depth, diving in depth into the subject. But understanding these concepts here will go a very long way for you. So in this chapter, we are going to understand various principles and concepts involved in project risk management, specifically indicating various roles and responsibilities of stakeholders and project management manager. So here we have the definition of project risk. Again, we have already seen it many times. Individual risk and overall project risk, we have a bit talked about it a bit, and we do understand what it is, but I will explain it a bit more. Natural project risk management sequence, what is that? Then risk management as an integrative function, which I have shown in the previous lecture also, that risk management, I put the risk management in the middle, and all the knowledge areas, put them all around risk management and try to identify the risk in each and every knowledge area, and then integrate this through project management, through integration knowledge area. Stakeholder risk attitude is again a very interesting topic. Variations of risk factors through the project life cycle. Four-phase approach. The approaches I am discussing here are not going to be exclusively from the point of view of PMBOK or the risk standard or PMI. I am going to talk about all the international approaches about risk management, and then later on we'll focus on to the risk management of PMI. So there are four-phase approach. Then there is iterative process, communication, responsibility of project risk management, and ultimately project manager's role in that. Okay, we have already seen this slide and we have already talked about the project objectives and the project risk. About uncertainty, we do understand that this is the probability of something happening, or it is the likelihood, and it should be clearly described, which is not really possible all the time. It is less specific. That is the uncertainty which we are not sure about, and therefore we try our level best to make it as clear as possible. But then there is another thing in addition to the uncertainty, and that is the effect of this risk happening. What if this risk happens? It will impact our working. It will leave impact on our project objectives like scope, time, and cost, and the consequences we have to bear then. And this impact is not, as we know that risks are positive and negative. So this impact might be negative or positive, and as you understand, negative is called threats and positive is called opportunities. And these threats may also be ultimately called as the issues or problems. When that risk materializes, when that threat materializes, it turns into issues, and later if they are not resolved, they turn into problems. So similarly, the positive risk, when it materializes, it turns into benefits. So risk is risk until and unless it happens. As soon as it happens, the negative risk turns into issues or problems, and the positive risk, which is opportunity, turns into benefits. So here we did talk about the cause and the effect. So what is the cause? Cause is the event or circumstance which currently exists or are certain to exist in the future and which might give rise to risk. So every risk, cause is not the risk itself. Cause is the cause of that uncertainty. So there has to be a link to a probable cause, that if this happens, there is a likelihood that this risk will occur. And if this risk occur, that will affect us in this way. So there are three things actually. There is a cause, there is the risk, and then there is an effect. The effect is conditional future event, the consequence of that risk, or conditions which would directly affect one or more project objectives if the associated risk occurs. So risk, as I said, is risk only when it is able to affect your project objectives, and which are scope, time, and cost. And these are the three baselines we have: scope baseline, schedule baseline, and cost baseline. If any of these baselines is disturbed, only then it is a risk. If it is a risk, then there is uncertainty into this risk, and there is a cause of this risk, and as we said, there is an effect. So if we join this chain together, this becomes cause, risk, effect chain. It can be used in a structured risk statement or risk description to ensure that each of these three elements is properly described. So when normally I ask my students to tell me some of the risks you have in your project, they come up with very strange kind of risks. So let me ask you, what if you are, maybe constructing a house, what could be a risk in that? Tell me. If you are trying to construct a house, tell me any one risk.
Sir, risk to means risk can always be identified against the objective. So what is the objective? So if the objective is getting that house constructed in a certain time within a certain budget, so
Right.
there can be risk associated to that budget,
It has to
the
be, yes.
time, the schedule, the scope
Of course, of course.
itself.
Just take on any one of the activities which comes to your mind and tell me a very specific risk. Because we understand that risk is something which impacts any of the objectives, scope or time or cost. Just imagine there is a project and this is a construction of a house. So you can say that when I am constructing the wall, this may occur or something like that. So just tell me on any activity, any risk.
Let us identify that the quality will be poor because of a lack of an oversight during the work being done. So the house being constructed, so there is a risk that it will have a poor quality of the construction.
Okay. So actually, you are trying to tell me the impact of the risk, right? Isn't it? Quality is poor. This is the project objective which will not be satisfied. So this is the consequence. This is the effect. Where is the risk?
So the contractor not finishing work halfway through, the contractor running away is a very pretty normal risk these days.
Okay. So if the contractor runs away in the middle, is it a risk or a cause or a effect? Contractor running away, is it a risk or it is a cause or is it an effect?
So it's a risk.
So it is a risk. Okay, and the Muid,
Yes.
what Muid was telling us, it was an effect. It was not a risk. It was not even a cause. You are telling me something which is a risk, but I am unable to relate it because you have not given me a cause for it and you are not given me any effect to it. How do I know it is going to affect me? If contractor runs away and there is no problem with my scope or time or cost, then it is not my risk at all. So you have to deliberately and explicitly show the effect and the cause.
ठीक
Without
है
the cause, risk, and effect chain, the statement cannot be complete. The complete structured risk statement should include a cause, a risk, and an effect.
Sir, I related somehow to the risk to a cause as well, that because of a lack of an oversight,
Okay, fine.
there is a risk that the construction quality will be poor.
Okay. Due to the lack of oversight, the construction quality will be poor. No, okay. Quality will be poor is again the effect. It is not the risk.
Okay.
You have given me
It
a
could be a
cause,
function of.
you have given me a cause, you have given me an effect, but you have not given me a risk. You understand where I am leading
Yeah.
you?
Sir, I
Yes,
think
yes, yes. Exactly.
So I think the point you're making is that every risk should be in the cause risk effect chain
Exactly. It has
description.
to. It
That would
has.
make it more clear for
It
everyone
can. It
to
can
understand.
only be explained in that manner. You see, what I was trying to tell you earlier.
Yes.
My students usually, when I ask them what is the risk in your project, they will say rainfall, time delay. So time delay is a effect. Time delay is not a risk at all. And I am completely lost why there should be a time delay. Tell me a reason. Tell me a cause. Tell me why there will be a time delay. So the risk will be a probability, like you said, due to lack of expertise. It This is the cause due to lack of expertise, and naturally you can explain it more in due to lack of expertise in a specific area. Then I'm now coming to the risk. There is a high likelihood that this will occur. Something will occur. So describe that something. There is a high likelihood. I'm showing the probability here. There is a high likelihood that this thing will occur, which will affect which will affect the quality of the project. And if you want to be even more specific, I would love it. You should tell me exactly where it is going to affect, and ultimately we will then categorize it whether it is impacting the scope, time, or cost. Let the scope, time, and cost be separate. Let me show the immediate effect of that risk. Right? Do you get me now?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. Now the risk in your mind, can you structure it in this format? Both of you take your own risk, whatever risk you are saying, Khayyam and Mohit, convert it into cause risk effect format, and let's discuss it.
So the risk which I talked about,
Hmm?
usko if I were to put it in a cause risk effect chain, that would be because of poor estimation at the time of signing of contract. Now there's a risk that the contractor might leave the project in the middle, which will result in non-completion of the project in this time frame
Okay.
which was
Right,
agreed
right. Okay.
at the beginning.
Okay. You have given me the cause, you have given me the risk and the effect. But if you look at it very closely, you will yourself find out that this is a very loosely worded statement, and it could even be further clarified. And when you will try to dig down, you will find that due to lack of that thing, it has to be more specific. And sometimes the thing you are indicating as risk is not a risk at all. It is basically a cause. And actually, you are missing out on a risk. So I'm just giving you a food for thought that the thing you are terming as a risk might be a cause itself, or an effect itself, but no, but there could be some other risk actually behind it. For example, I said due to poor insulation, there is a high likelihood that this room will catch fire, and that will destroy that will cause this much of damage, thus causing delay and this and that, what is scope, time, effect, whatever effects on the scope, time, and cost we have. Okay, so I said due to poor insulation. So um, isn't it uh, isn't the insulation the risk? We will have to consider, take the cause as a risk for a moment, and see, is the insulation not the risk? If insulation is risk, then why is insulation so poor? You can go back a step and see why the insulation is so poor. Then you will find that due to you know hurried procurement of the wiring, the insulation was poor, and therefore there's something is happening. So what I'm guiding you towards is that you may have to think, you may have to travel backwards and forwards to exactly find which actually is the appropriate cause, risk, and effect for your risk. It is not a loosely worded statement. It has to be very specific and very solid. More firm you are about your statement, less confused the people will be in the future. So, although I do not contest that your statement is not right, your statement might be exactly right, but there is some deliberation required even further to play around with it. Ji Mohit, what comes from your side?
Sir, in this format, like means it resembles to the situation we are in. Uh, I would say because there would be the lack of availability for
Mm-hmm,
the manpower and the supply materials
mm-hmm,
during the month of Ramzan.
mm-hmm,
The schedule of the project might overrun or will stretch, will overrun its due date,
mm-hmm.
and then the impact is that the cost may increase.
Schedule will overrun and cost will increase.
Yeah,
This is a bit confusing for me.
sir, schedule will be overrun because of lack of availability of labor and supplies.
Mm-hmm.
So once we have to fund that project for a longer period of time, so then
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna cost us more.
Okay, one more lesson here. Um, I agree that the effect can be on scope as well as time as well as cost, but they cannot, schedule cannot be the risk and cause effect, and the cost cannot be the effect because both of these are going to be impacted. So the risk you are specifying cannot be that we will get delayed or we will overspend or we will overshoot. There will be a scope creep. These are not the risks, these are the effects. Never ever try to bring in the scope, time, and cost in the risk itself. It is not the probability. So try to keep them on the effect side always.
Okay, okay.
Anyways, we will deliberate more on this, but I have just given you idea how this cause risk effect statement is to be worded, and we can talk more about it later.
And I
Sir,
agree to your explanations here because means a lot of time we identify risk.
Hmm.
So these three terms are means where the most confusion lies
Yeah, exactly.
because risks are worded and even in our like in the general project world.
Hmm.
So means these terms are very like intermingled or even in the definition of risk.
Hmm.
Even if I open my company's risk register in front of me,
Hmm.
so I would find more or less the same problem there in the risk
Exactly.
definition, almost everywhere.
Exactly. The risks are so poorly worded. So, what do you expect the actions will be taken on them? Actually, even the risk in itself is not clear. How are we going to take analyze this risk, and how are we going to have any response to it? So whatever we do, it will be faulty. So the very first thing is when we are identifying the risk, it should be properly identified in a cost risk effect format, and we must debate it and put the things at the right place.
Yes, exactly. And I think I cut Khyam off somewhere.
it's all right. So,
Sorry.
Ismail, I have a very relevant example because all the UN agencies, all the communication equipment that we use for security, we
Mm-hmm,
have a sole sourcing contract with Thuraya.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
और उसमें प्रॉब्लम ये होती है कि because it's they know they're the sole source for us, they're never too bothered about all the time. My security colleagues are bitching about कि जी Pakistan में they are not sending us the equipment on time, and
mm-hmm,
उसकी वजह से a lot of our personnel, they do not get deployed in
mm.
across Pakistan. So I was
Right.
just trying to relate because we have a sole sourcing contract.
Mm-hmm,
The vendor is not concerned.
mm.
उसका effect ये होता है कि our projects do not start on time because the project staff cannot be deployed.
Exactly.
उसमें
So
हमें
basically, it is the effect you people are more bothered about. You are not focusing on the risk. You are you're always talking about we'll get delayed, get delayed. Due to this reason,
So
we'll
the
get delayed.
scenario where Khyam defined, so the risk is that the lower power or the control over the sole source or supplier?
The risk is that we have a so risk हमारा तो यही है इसके अंदर कि they are not worried about the priority. They don't give priority to Pakistan staff when it comes to sending the security equipment.
Okay.
Because we have a sole source Thoraya के साथ.
Of course.
That's the risk. उनका attitude is not concerned कि they need to send the equipment to Pakistan on time.
Exactly. So when you are making a deal with them, you're having the contract with them. At that time, you should take care of these conditions.
So unfortunately, there are sole source और कोई source है नहीं हमारे पास.
Okay. Then be creative and think of another solution. Why are you relying on a single source?
So unfortunately, क्योंकि हमारे contracts globally चलते हैं. For example, if UN headquarters decide it has to go to Thoraya, for all the 200 countries, it will be Thoraya.
No, I agree with that. No, but I'm just asking you not to freeze your thinking process on what is available. Try to be creative, and if this idea which you can come up with creatively can be workable, can even go back up, and even the rules can change. But you see, if you stop thinking about it and you stop contributing about this issue, it will never be solved. So you will learn to live with it as you have already. So it will never be solved. You have to think of an alternative, and you may or may not be able to influence the reason for that, but naturally you can point out towards that. Okay.
That's true.
Right. So occurrence and scope. When risk event occurs, it ceases to become uncertain. This I have been talking about time and again. There are many things which will be repeated so many times that they will become second nature. And sometimes you will feel that, this thing has been repeated 20 times a year. And still I'm saying that, but this is just burning into your memory. That risk event, as soon as it occurs, it doesn't remain a risk anymore, because it is no more certain. It has now happened. When it has happened, uncertainty has gone. Now it has become issue. Both issue, problem, or benefit entail project management actions that are outside the scope of project risk management process. Now, as soon as the risk has finished, risk management has finished. So all the actions which now will be taken on that issue will be issue management or problem solving or whatever, or benefit realization, whatever it is, but this is not risk management. So all the actions we take while the risk has yet not happened, only that much is the risk management and nothing more. So we must clearly define the scope of risk management. Risk management is good till the risk has occurred. Are we clear about it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then we have also talked about the individual and overall risk. Let's talk a bit more about it. Individual risk is one specific event or condition that might affect our project objective or one or more project objectives. One single risk. But there are so many risks in your organization, and as I have already explained to you, that all the risks are, likely to occur at various different moments in the life of the project. So your project is risky, all the time, sometime more, sometime less. And then there is also a possibility of more than one risk occurring at the same time. You might be aware about the Murphy's law, या जैसे वो कहते हैं जी शरफू चढ़ गया. So Murphy's law, one bad thing happens, then there is a rain of other bad things happening to you. So one risk will open up the floodgates of many other risks. So risks will happen in consortium. So what is the most sensitive point in the life of your project when the project becomes most risky? That is one point. There's one point to think about. Second is looking at all the risks in the project at different points in the life of the project. What is the overall weight of the risk on the project? That is, what is the overall project risk? Effect of uncertainty. Naturally, uncertainty is positive or negative, whatever. The cumulative effect of all the positive and negative risks at various points in the life of the project as a whole, how much risky it makes the project is the overall project risk. So this could not be as simple as just adding up all the risks. It is more than the sum of individual risks on a project, because when two risks are simultaneously occurring, they may be more damaging as compared to if they are separately occurring. So therefore, there would be a synergetic effect if more than one risks are occurring simultaneously, and therefore the cumulative effect on whole of the project can be very different from the total sum of all the risks. It represents exposure of the stakeholders to the implications of variations in project outcome. Your stakeholder plays a very, very important role. You see, it is all about your stakeholder, your how much risk your stakeholder is ready to take. That will actually define what is risk for this project. Maybe one of the stakeholders in one organization, something which was a risk in your earlier project is not considered as a risk in this project because your stakeholder is very tolerant about the risk. They think it is no problem. This much is this much uh, we can always bear easily without any taking any action. So, for example, with Saudis, if you are working on a project in Saudi Arabia, probably money is not a matter. They don't care about money. So they may be more bothered about time. So their way of thinking and their way of risk management would be way different than what we are doing here in Pakistan or anywhere else. So it all depends upon the exposure of the stakeholder to the implications of variations of project outcome. What do they want? Important component of strategic design decision making, program management, portfolio management, and project governance, where investment are sanctioned or cancelled and priorities are set. So, due to this overall risk of a project, many decisions can be taken whether to take on this project or not. Maybe just because the project is too risky, there might be a strategic decision to not to go for this project at all. This decision could be strategic in nature. This type of decision could have been taken at the program level if this is a project within a program, or at the portfolio level, or maybe the project governance has provided you some guideline about investment that could guide which projects should be sanctioned and should not be sanctioned. A project which is running and suddenly becomes very risky can even be cancelled, or they could be reprioritized. The portfolio could reprioritize your projects, and ultimately the project you were doing, which was at top priority in the beginning, now lies much lower, and you do not get resources as desired just because it is not the priority of the organization. And maybe someday your project gets cancelled just because of its risk profile. So it is necessary to set realistic targets for the cost and duration of the project, establishing the contingency reserves levels required to protect the project stakeholders. Naturally, stakeholder has to define how much risk they are ready to take, and according to their needs and requirements and expectations, we will appropriately have the contingency reserve. We will set appropriate project priorities. Which project is more important? Naturally, and it is a job of the even the portfolio manager or the program manager to set the priorities for the projects. Judge whether the risk of overall success is increasing or decreasing as implementation advances. So as I move on into the life of the project, the circumstances are continuously changing. Is my project becoming more risky or less risky? So whether I should move on, continue, or the prioritization will accordingly change. And maybe, as I said, initially your project might have been very appropriate and very nice, but in the middle of the thing, it start becoming more risky, and it has gone down in prioritization. And a little later on, this has now been cancelled. just because of the strategic decision that we cannot afford this much risk. So overall project risk plays a very important role in getting us to this decision making. So now integrating the risk into the project management, poor performance on projects is attributed to, as this slide we have, this point we have already talked about. First of all, we blame the unforeseen events, and next we blame the foreseen events. As far as the unforeseen events are concerned, these are the unknown risks. These unknown I am saying because this risk cannot be thought about, cannot be conceived, and therefore I don't know about this risk. I do not know what can happen. I do not know what damage can occur. So I cannot know anything about this risk. So which may or might not be anticipated by more experienced project managers. Foreseen risks are which we have already anticipated and we have listed it down, but we have not fully understood it. I would like to call it a known unknown, meaning we are partially certain about that this risk can occur. Management's attitude to risk itself is some have little understanding of the concept. In most of the cases, people do not understand the risk. Management is not really bothered about it. They are not concerned much about the risk, so they have no understanding of the risk. Other lack confidence in mathematical techniques. This also we talked about, that they don't trust the calculations, and results obtained performing to preferring to they rather will like to go for aggressive risk taking or undue caution. Aggressive risk taking is trying to be brave for nothing without any calculation, and undue caution is trying to be extra cautious and ultimately not taking risk at all. So inherent risks may simply be optimistically ignored. This also we have talked about. So what is the natural sequence of project of risk management? First of all is the concept phase. This is not according to PMI, but I am just telling you how the things come into being. In the concept phase, we have greatest degree of uncertainty. When we are in the beginning of the project, we know nothing what will happen to us, right? So the level of uncertainty is greatest in the beginning of a project. Change is an inevitable part of the iterative nature of managing projects. So we have options. This will happen. This can happen. If this happens, then I'll do this. And if that happens, I'll do that. So if and but there are so many in the beginning. So you have to plan for all the contingencies. Yet its extent and effects are often underestimated at this time. Because we do not have all the facts and figures, so whatever we try to conceive, just like I was asking you to just phrase some of the risks, and you were unable to come up with an appropriate statement of the risk even. That is because in absence of all the data, you probably cannot pinpoint to exact risk. So they are usually underestimated at that time. Need for a process for the realistic appraisal of factors affecting the accomplishment phase of the project is essential. So before you can enter into the execution or accomplishment phases, where execution, monitoring and control, all that is happening, you must have some kind of realistic appraisal. At least you must know those factors which impact you. So that is the concept phase. The formal process is risks are systematically identified. They should be systematically identified, very carefully identified. As I said, in a proper statement, they must be debated. They must be, sought out from all sources, all possible sources. You must not limit it to only a small audience. You may even ask others who are not even concerned about your project. Try to get as much information as possible depending upon what kind of time is available to you. Naturally, I do not want you to be wasting a lot of time in analysis, but still, whatever time can be spared for analysis must be spared, and proper identification, proper assessment of the risk must be provided for. It involves deliberate sequence of identification followed by mitigation. Mitigation is again planning, but in mitigation you come up with the solutions for with your responses. But I'm not really going to go as far as the mitigation right now. Right now, I'm more concerned about proper identification and thorough assessment. Mitigation calls for assessment and then response. So, as a result of the assessment, we will then kind of make the decision what should we do in case of this specific risk. So, this is more of a response or a decision. We have defensive actions taken for, like, we are trying to avoid the risk or deflect the risk. Avoidance, we are getting out of the way of the risk. This is risk avoidance. And deflection is that I am somehow trying to shield myself from the risk as if it is deflected to someone else. So deflection can be kind of like of risk transference. This could be a type of a mitigation and things like that. Risk assessment is that detailed impact analysis, response planning, and contingency planning. This all is part of the assessment. Alternative workarounds could also be thought about, but workarounds from PMI perspective is not the responsibility of risk management. Although being proactive, we can come up with the workarounds along with the contingencies we are developing, but workaround is something which is done after the risk has occurred. So we can suggest certain workarounds, but it is not the responsibility of risk management, project risk management, to implement those workarounds. Workarounds are like the plan B for doing something. So I had a plan A and I'm working on that, and suddenly it is completely blocked off and I cannot move on that path any further. Then I already have created a alternate plan on which I quickly shift. So this is not risk management. This is alternative workarounds which I have created, and naturally this is also part of the planning, but this is not risk management. As far as the contingencies are concerned, yes, of course, we budget the contingency allowance at various levels in the project, at the activity level, at the work package level, and management level, and so many other places. We have a lot many reserves created or contingencies created. Uncertainties are numerous and interrelated. Now, this is also interesting. We do understand that there are many uncertainties in the project, and especially in the beginning of the project, there are highest number of uncertainties. But the next problem is the some of the uncertainties could be interlinked or interrelated. If this happens, then there is further likelihood of that happening, and if that happens, there is a further likelihood of anything else, another uncertainty happening. So if they are linked, then this is like a sympathetic detonation. Affects project results in complex ways. Tends to lead to underestimation of the risk, because if we are not considering the interrelationship of uncertainties, we may be having a myopic view, and we are just estimating for one possibility, and we are not considering other chain of possibilities ahead. So we can be underestimating. And there is a difficulty in identifying and prioritizing the areas to focus for risk management. A systematic approach is required to sort through the myriad of uncertainties. First of all, I must collect all the uncertainties, or I must identify all the risks. Then I should pinpoint onto the critical ones. And then I should identify effective ways of reducing those uncertainties and consistent with overall project risk management. Failure to give proper recognition to risk management can lead to unnecessary and often substantial losses, or even complete project failure. I think this is very much self-explanatory. Status of risk on a project varies significantly during the course of its life cycle. Most effective time for achieving the greatest impact on project results is early on in the project development phase. So when the project is in development phase, when we are starting off, when we are planning and getting into the execution, that is the time in the beginning when the maximum impact of the risks would be there in blue. Risk management should be established as a continuing integrative function throughout the project lifecycle. So you must understand that like we were discussing the processes, there are processes in project management which are done only once. There are processes in project management which are done at certain intervals, and there are processes which are continuous in nature. So risk management completely is continuous in nature and integrative in nature. We have to continuously, throughout the life of the project, we have to keep identifying the risks all the time, analyzing them all the time, coming up with the responses, and integrating all this into the whole risk management or the project management plan. And this will happen throughout the project life cycle. This diagram I have shown you earlier, and although it is from a backward version of Max Weidmann's book, but naturally this is an interesting diagram, and I'll show you as far as Max Weidmann has shown the relationship with each one of these knowledge areas. Although the stakeholder is not shown here, but even then, this does cover all of the other knowledge areas. For example, if we are talking about integration, what could be the risk event? What kind of risk events could be there for integration? Like incorrect start of integrated project management relative to project lifecycle. So things related to the project lifecycle, choice of the alternatives, like at the time of the scope statement, the things, the project lifecycle which is defined is not properly defined, or it is not right. So this could be a risk which could cause big damage in the future. So what can you be careful about? The problems are, risk conditions are inadequate planning at this stage, at the stage of integration. Properly, you are not integrating all the knowledge areas into the project management plan. Some things have been missed out, and they will become the risk, and they will ultimately harm your project overall. Integration and resource allocation. Anything which reduces the probability of properly determining project objectives, anything which directly or indirectly reduces the probability of project success. Then, as far as the scope is concerned, changes in scope to meet project objectives. Regulatory changes, you see, we do have a mechanism in project management for having a thorough change control mechanism. So there must be a mechanism as if the scope cannot creep. Scope creep are those changes which occur without any change control mechanism. So if you do not have a regulatory change mechanism, then ultimately your scope will creep. So from the scope side, we will have so many problems. There is a lot of pressure from the stakeholder to change the scope all the time. Whether by hook or crook, they will try to bring in their changes into the scope, and they will expect you to be behaving normally. And they think that everything can be done in the same way, in the same budget, in the same time, even if the scope has been changed. So you have to understand these risk conditions. This again could be due to inadequacy of planning or planning lead time. You are not giving enough time to the planning, and proper scoping has not be done, could not be done, or poor definition of scope breakdown or the work breakdown structure. Inconsistent or incomplete or unclear definition of quality requirements. Because quality, why I'm saying quality here, because the requirement gathering happens in scope, so quality requirements are also gathered in scope. Inadequate scope control design. Then is quality. In quality, risk events could be the performance failure or environmental impact. Risk conditions could be poor attitude to quality. You do not have a quality policy in the organization, or you did not plan for quality, or there is a poor planning in quality. Substandard design, material or workmanship, inadequate quality assurance programs. So again, conceptually, you are not very much tied towards the quality, or your top level executives are not committed to quality. As far as schedule is concerned, naturally, you have already mentioned there will be delays. Yes, of course, there will be delays. But why there will be delays? What are the risks? So, all those risks which could cause delay, like strikes or labor or material unavailability or extreme weather or rejection of work, there could be a number of reasons. So, try to sort out all those problems, identify all those risks, and then only mention this impact. Risk conditions could be errors in estimating the time and resources, poor allocation and management of float, scope of work changes without due allowance for time extension and acceleration, early release of competitor has released something um, earlier and now you are at a fast track or your project has altogether been failed. Cost is concerned, risk event could be impact of accidents, fire or theft, unpredictable price changes or price hikes due to supply shortages or whatever. Risk conditions could be estimating errors, including estimating uncertainty, lack of investigation of predictable problems, inadequate productivity, cost changes and contingency control, poor maintenance, security, etc. So, uh, these are just the hints I'm giving you, right? You can take your cue from it and you can keep the guidance from here, but risks you have to identify, it is your job. Now, what is the risk in risk management? What is the risk in risk management? The risk of overlooking a risk, changes in the work necessary to achieve the scope. So risk conditions could be ignoring risk or assuming it away, thinking, well, no, it will not matter. You just assume it away. Inappropriate or unclear assignment of responsibility. Like, we'll talk about the various roles in risk management. We have got risk owners, we have got risk action takers, risk managers, or for that matter, project managers. What are the roles of these different people in the risk management? They should be properly assigned. Poor insurance management. The risk transfer mechanism is not appropriately designed. Inappropriate or unclear contractual assignments of project of the risk. As far as procurement and contracts is concerned, contractor insolvency, somebody was giving me this point. The contractor runs away or leaves the job. Claims, settlement, or litigation. Risk conditions could be unenforceable conditions or clauses, that is due to poor contracting clauses. Incompetent or financially unsound workers or contractors. Adversarial relationships, inappropriate or unclear conditions. Human resource, or for that matter, now we call it resource. So let's not only focus on human resource. According to sixth edition, we have got resource. So let's talk about the living and non-living, both resources, human resources and other resources. So as far as the human resources, there could be strikes, terminations, organizational breakdown, and other resources. The supply and demand issues can be there. Risk conditions could be conflict is not being managed properly, poor organizational structure, definition of allocation of responsibility is not there, poor use of accountability, absence of leadership, or consequences are ignorance of rules. In communication, what could be the risk? Inaction or wrong action due to incorrect information or communication failure. Risk conditions could be carelessness in planning or in communicating, improper handling of complexity, lack of adequate consultation with projects public, internal and external. So these were some of the relationships with some of the knowledge areas, but naturally those which are missing, they can be built into it, and you are at least not tuned up to think from that angle that you should try to integrate the risk into the project management, considering all the knowledge areas. So so far so good.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So let's talk about the stakeholders' risk attitude. We'll talk more about it, but still, let's start what the risk attitude is. This is the extent to which an individual risk or overall project risk matters. To whom? To the stakeholder. You see, we are doing this project for the stakeholders, which include the customer, which include other parties. So all those people who are involved for this project, they will determine how much risk they can bear. So their risk attitude has to be determined first, because all the risks are identified according to that criteria. So we must understand what is their risk attitude. Maybe, as I said, in Saudis, they probably, in their attitude, cost doesn't matter. In another place, time may not matter. In another place, scope may not matter, or it could be any combination. But all the three project objectives, they may have varying uh, demands from the stakeholder for different countries, for different projects, from different organizations. A wide range of factors influence the risk attitude, scale of the project within the range of stakeholders' overall activities. So, how big is this project? What is the scale of this project? So, stakeholders, for the stakeholders who are involved in this project, they might have been involved in 100 other projects. And from their perspective, this is a small, tickly bitly project, and they damn care about it. So, their tolerance about this project is not, no, they're not, they have a huge tolerance about it. Whatever happens, happens. This also, scale of the project itself can also matter. Strength of public commitment made about the performance of a project. If you have made a commitment to public that we will release this, or we will, inaugurate this project on this date, whether that has any other importance or not, but there is an importance of public commitment. So naturally, the tolerances are set, or the attitudes are set of the stakeholders according to this. Then stakeholder sensitivity to various issues like environmental impacts and industrial relations. You see, these things, otherwise, from the company point of view, may not matter. An organization may not be much bothered about the environmental impacts and what is the impact of this project on the environment of Pakistan. So, but there are other bodies, maybe from government, maybe from international bodies, they will like to enforce those, and they become the stakeholders, and they are very sensitive about the environment or the industry relationship or something else. So those things will also form up the risk attitude of the stakeholder. Usually, it results in a desire for increased certainty in the project outcomes. So, stakeholders' risk attitude, stakeholders would like to be certain about things. They want to know everything about the project, especially of their interest. In whatever matter they are more interested, they would be uh, they would like to know more about it. Maybe they are more interested in uh, getting the project completed in time, so they would like to know everything about time. But at the same time, they may be very tolerant about cost. They are very flexible about cost. So they may express a preference for one project objective over another. Strongly influenced by organizational culture. You know, as I was just mentioning, that uh, um, the organizational culture in government, nobody cares, and everybody is very strongly influenced by that culture, and nobody wants to work. There's a very interesting kind of a mechanism in government organizations, um, that there's a hardly few people who are concerned about the thing, and they will be the only people working. Rest, everybody relaxes, and they damn care. This is the organization culture which have been developed over time. So, if somebody thinks that government projects cannot succeed, or government projects will have this problem always, this is a wrong thinking. Basically, we have never ever tried to change the organization culture in government. We have concreted the spontaneous spontaneously developed culture, which was not orchestrated, which was influenced highly by corruption and other things. So they just want to relax. You see, wastage of time in a government office is also a kind of a corruption. even if that person is not taking any bribery or anything. But we don't realize it, we understand it, that this is okay. So, whatever is the organization culture, that will also strongly influence your risk attitude. It depends how open an organization is. Transparency in an organization, involvement of the people, of the employees of an organization in the decisions also matters a lot. This will also change the risk attitude altogether. Risk attitudes must be identified and managed proactively and deliberately throughout the project risk management process, and they may differ from project to project for the same stakeholder. For one project, they have a different attitude. For another project, they have a different attitude. So we must understand this, and not only that, but international, cross-industry, and multi-organizational teams where they are working, they are impacted by various types of stakeholders from multicultural environments, and their risk attitude is going to be different. So anyone who has worked in a government organization and now is working in some other organization, and later on you start your own business, or then you get into a multicultural environment, this exposure will make you understand the various risk attitudes in various different organizations. So serving in one organization alone probably will not give you that sense of risk attitude which you should have from a broad category. Variations of risk factors. Project risk factors are also subject to considerable change during the project lifecycle. That risk attitudes in the beginning of the project could be different from the risk attitudes in the end of the project or in the middle of the project. There are 4 generic phases of a typical project. Like, I said, this is not PMI dictation, but we are just going to take it. And that is conceptual phase, development phase, implementation phase, and the termination phase. Remember, this is not a life cycle. This is not anything, but just imagine that these are the generic 4 phases of the project. In concept and development, we are doing the project planning. In implementation and termination, we are doing the realization and accomplishment. Opportunity and threat both remain high during the project planning. As I said earlier, in the beginning, the risk is high. No matter it is opportunity or threat, they are high because the uncertainty is very high. And amount at stake remains low during planning because we don't know much about the details about each risk, and as and when those details become available, we would be more sure about exactly how much amount is at stake. So we will underestimate in the beginning, and we will have so many risks in the beginning, so many uncertainties. As we move ahead in the life of the project, the uncertainties will keep decreasing and the detail will keep coming. So, internationally, what people recognize risk management as, they have divided it into 4 parts: identification, assessment, response, and documentation. This may have a similarity with what we will be doing in project management, but there are many ways of looking at the risk management. If you look at it from the perspective of ISO or CMM, that would be even different. So don't be confused by these phases, but this is one way of looking at the risk management in general, not for the project. Generally, whenever you want to do risk management, there is one phase in which you do the identification, then you do the assessment, then you do the responses, and the documentation. Now, in PMI, we do not have documentation as a separate phase. But documentation is an output, which we generally call the risk reports or risk registers. And these things, identification, assessment, and response, is basically further elaborated in more detail in PMI. And that is, we identify the risk, and assessment is further divided into 2 parts. That is, we have the qualitative risk analysis and quantitative risk analysis. And response is also further divided into two parts. That is, plan the risk responses and then implement the risk responses. And then we also monitor the risk. So there is a lot of similarities with whatever standard or book you follow about risk management. You have the basic concept about the risk and you can translate and tailor it according to your requirements. So one thing we understand that this is an iterative process. This is a continuous process. The identification and analysis of risk should be revisited periodically. The progress on risk response actions should be monitored. Naturally, action plans should be accordingly adjusted. When and where we find there is anything changing, we should amend it, and we should progressively elaborate and keep changing our plans. It may also be necessary to revisit the risk management planning process. We may have to, the very first thing we do in PMI, in risk management, is we develop a risk management plan. We'll talk about that, but risk management plan is the very first thing we do, and that gives us the guideline or the rules of how to identify the risk, how to qualitative and quantitative analysis be done, how responses will be built, how they will be implemented, how they will be monitored. So basically, we have written down all the rules or the guideline in the beginning in the shape of the risk management plan. So this risk management plan can be revisited anytime. And maybe our risk management plan is not being that effective, which is proven later. So whenever we find that our risk management plan is not being effective and we are unable to capture the risks which are happening, so we may revise, we may tailor the attitudes or whatever, we may review them and set new margins and then identify new risks. Developing an initial risk management plan and risk assessment is the start of the process, not the end. And this is going to be a continuous thing. Now the question is, what should be the frequency of the risk management and how deep you should go? Frequency and depth of reviews and updates will depend on the nature of the project, how volatile the environment is, and the timing of other project management reviews and updates. If you have got a progress report going every week, then probably you will align your risk management process with that or according to that. Then there is a lot of importance of communication in risk management. You see, the previous topic, frequency and depth, I'll talk more about later. But here I just given you the hint that frequency and depth is affected by. It depends upon the nature, volatility, and timing. But when should it be done? I'll elaborate more. Communication and risk management has its own importance because once we have planned the risk, this has to be properly communicated to the roles we have defined. Those who have been made responsible for doing certain things all should know that, and the reports and returns created by the risk management have to be implemented. So risk management is not something which can happen in isolation. So does the quality. Quality management can also not be done alone. For risk management, for quality management, you need to have commitment from the top executive level. They really want to have risk management or the quality management applied in their organization. Only then we will have it possible to meet any success. Success relies heavily on communication throughout the process. So risk management is going throughout, and whatever the changes are coming into the plan, we must keep communicating them to all concerned quarters. Comprehensive input from stakeholders to ensure nothing significant is overlooked. So stakeholders, we have to hold hands right from the beginning till the end of the project. We must not keep them in dark. We must take them in confidence. We must, get all the data from them, their attitudes, their tolerances and everything. And not only that, but we will have to keep them engaged and updated throughout the life of the project. So if we do that, we are able to assess the risks more realistically. Credibility of the process and the commitment of those who manage risk can only be ensured by the way the process operates and the conclusions it produces. So at the end of the day, it would be seen how effective you have been. So if you have done well at the end of the day, then your risk management process will be validated. So to ensure that you get good results at the end, you must take care of these points. You must communicate properly. You must get the stakeholders engaged and involved, and you must ensure that your credibility will ultimately be maintained. Effective and honest communication with the rest of the project team and other stakeholders, meaning what there is, I am not really able to understand why there are secrets in project. What is so secret about a public project? If we are constructing a road, or for that matter, CPAC, what is so strategically secret about this thing? You understand my point? We try to hide everything under the garb of secrecy, and ultimately we completely remove the transparency from the system. The people don't know what they are doing, the stakeholders don't know what they are getting, and ultimately everybody has got misgivings. You see, if there is a matter of national interest, I understand that you can keep certain things in secret, but that is only in the case of national interest. But you can't have everything hidden out from the public. If you are making a road, you must tell the people why are you making the road, how long will it take, how much money will be spent on that. So we try to be, you know, very hideous about it. We hide the things, and the requirement is that communication should be open, honest, and transparent. Communications of results must meet specific stakeholder needs and expectations reflected in the project communication strategy. Roles and responsibility of each stakeholder must be identified and agreed upon. Now let's talk about the responsibility of the project risk management. Risk management is everyone's responsibility. Everyone is responsible for identification, management, and the, the whole control of the risk throughout the life of the project. So whatever role you are playing in risk management, you are specifically responsible for that portion of work what you are taking care of. If there is a building being constructed, then everyone who is working in that building must have some responsibility towards the risk management. A supervisor who is leading a small little team and he is getting the job done, he must be able to identify risks and communicate it to the project manager or the risk manager. The people who are working under him, they must provide the input. Not only the input in the identification of the risk, but also they might be very helpful in assessment. So everyone has a role. And not only that, we will assign certain roles to these people. What will they do as a response to that specific risk? So management of risk should not be left to few risk specialists, that this is the job of the project manager or the risk manager, and we don't have to bother about it. Everybody has to bother about it. It is everybody's responsibility. Project risk management is an integral part of all other project processes, which I have just proved. Each project risk can affect the project objectives, scope, time, and cost. Therefore, it proves the point that risk is not alone. Risk is impacting the most important baselines of the project, and therefore it is impacting the whole project, and therefore we must take it due importance. Specific roles depend upon the stakeholder placing and relationship to the project objectives. Roles and responsibilities of project risk must be clearly defined and communicated. Individuals should be held responsible and accountable for the results. Participating in all aspects of project risk management process must, all those concerned must be available. When we are identifying the project risk, then you should gather as many concerned people, as many stakeholders as possible. Or if that is not possible to get them all in one place, then you should have focus groups, and you should be doing the seminars or sessions for risk management with different audiences, approving risk responses and associated actions prior to implementation. Applying project contingency funds to deal with identified risks that occur during the project. Overseeing risk management by subcontractors and suppliers. That is also an issue. We have got a number of outsourced projects or subcontracts, and we have to see their risk management as well. Regularly reporting risk status to the key stakeholders with recommendations for appropriate strategic decisions and actions to maintain acceptable risk level. Escalating identified risks to senior management where appropriate. That is, outside the authority and control of project manager, requiring input, action from outside of project, or release of management funds might be appropriate. So these are some of the conditions where uh, this senior management has to get involved. We have to escalate the issue to the senior management when the things are not in control of the project manager and he needs to seek guidance or help or funding from outside. Monitoring the efficiency and effectiveness of the project risk management process is also the responsibility. Auditing risk responses for their effectiveness and documenting the lessons learned. So this is the whole life cycle of the project risk management in which we will be taking care of all these things. Okay, ji. Any comments so far?
No, sir, it's been very clear. Thank you.
Okay, then let's have a 5-minute break and then we'll continue later.
Sure, sir.
Sure, sir.
Right, gentlemen, I'm back. Are you there? Khayyam and Mohit?
Sir,
Okay.
Sir.
Should we start?
please, sir.
Sir, I have to drop, but I think it will be 11, your 11 sharp.
Okay.
So maybe I would not drop, but I would not be responding in the training, but you can continue.
What we can do is we can leave it here and we can do start the unit 5 from tomorrow again.
Sir, I don't want the schedule to suffer due to this because means.
No, don't
नहीं
worry.
नहीं इसको आप पॉजिटिव इफेक्ट में बयान करें मोइन.
नहीं मेरा ख्याल है कोई बात नहीं है, आप ब्रेक करें और हम क्योंकि फिर काम ही रह जाएंगे ना खाली, शायद भी नहीं है तो
Yes,
इंशाल्लाह
sir.
करते हैं.
नेक्स्ट 2 डेज वीकेंड के हैं, हम उसके अंदर उसको थोड़ा सा जो बीच में कुछ अगर रह भी जाता है तो उसको कवर कर लेंगे.
कोई नहीं जी, आप
If you want to wind it up here, so means.
What we can do is कि अगर कुछ ऐसी मुद्दत ऐसा प्रॉब्लम हो गया कि हम पूरा ना कर सके तो हम थोड़ा 1-2 दिन आगे भी जा सकते हैं. क्या ख्याल है?
That's all right, sir. Yeah.
चलिए
सर मेरे ख्याल में हो जाएगा वैसे भी. इट्स नॉट एन इशू.
हो जाएगा, कोई
आई
मसला
थिंक
नहीं
20.
है. बिल्कुल ठीक है. चलें जी, टेक केयर, फिर इंशाल्लाह मिलते हैं कल सेम टाइम. ओके जी.
Thank
Thank you, sir. Good night.
you.